Howdy, it's Jim Morado, and that is a city sightseeing tour bus in San Antonio, Texas, and this is March 2017. And this was a trip we took. Actually, this was our third trip to Texas, and within a few year period. A couple of friends of ours were talking about San Antonio, and we had just gone to San Antonio a couple of years earlier, and they did not have to twist our arm to convince us to take just a little. We took Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, flew in Thursday morning, came back home a little bit later on Sunday. But yeah, we thought a little 4-day weekend trip to San Antonio, even though we had just been there, not too long before, would be a great idea. We love San Antonio. It's one of those towns you hear a lot about. Believe the hype. It is just oozing with history. Lots and lots of history, not just the Alamo, but Teddy Roosevelt, the Rough Riders, rock and roll, Robert Johnson, the Pope. It's a big, significant Catholic community here. And this is just a fun area. Also, I love historic hotels, and San Antonio has just several right here by the Alamo. We're about to pass the Alamo in a little bit. There's the Menger Hotel. Teddy Roosevelt recruited Rough Riders here at one point, so Teddy Roosevelt spent a lot of time here. Some great, got some Borglum history. Lots of connections to the man that sculpted Mount Rushmore. In fact, I'll mention this in just a moment, but we were able to visit Lincoln Borglum, Gutzon's son's grave on this trip. So yeah, this is this is us riding on a city sightseeing tour bus. Let me just tell you about that a little bit first. As we go right past, there's the Alamo, the world famous Alamo, and it's very cool. I can talk for hours about the Alamo, and I just might do that. But we bought on this trip in 2017, we bought tickets for the city sightseeing tour bus. On our previous trip to the area, we bought tickets with the Alamo trolley tours. Both places do a great job. Both of them are a great dollar value, and we enjoyed both of them. Oh, I wanted to mention right here as we go past it, that is the monument to the defenders of the Alamo. It's a famous monument in its own right. It's the Alamo Cenotaph, and I believe it is exactly where Santa Anna burned some of the bodies of the defenders after the battle. So it's a very significant monument. A certain famous rock star relieved himself on that, I believe, back in the early 80s. There's a rumor that he actually did it on the Alamo, but I think he did it on the monument and was banned from the city for a while. Though I think he made an apology later on. Still, as a fan of history, that's not appreciated. There is there's a great post office right here, the San Antonio post office. As I've mentioned, I collect postmarks, and I've been in there a couple times. Very, very sweet people run that place, and they appreciate history, and I enjoyed talking to the staff there when I went in. So yeah, let me mention, because there's so much ground to cover, I'll try to point out buildings as we see them. But yeah, we used the city sightseeing tour bus on this trip, and we had a great driver named Robert who was hysterical. I did get some good audio from Robert as I was recording. Again, I was just recording this for my own pleasure, just something I thought I might watch later. But here, with some time on my hands, thanks to COVID, I thought I would share some of these videos with whoever wants to watch them. So I'm just filming out the window. I know Robert had to take some detours because some roads were closed. So this is just, a very city view of San Antonio. We're going to go by some buildings that aren't anything particularly special, but all of them are kind of neat. This just gives you a rough idea of San Antonio. But the two different hop-on, hop-off trolley companies in town were both great. They cover all the places you want to go into. They had some great package deals. You could use the bus a couple days, and then you could buy an upgrade. For a few extra dollars, you could go up in the Space Needle there in town, or take a boat tour through town. So they had some good deals. We liked both of them equally. They're both very good companies. One of them, though, takes you, I believe it was the Alamo Trolley Tours. They take you to the San Antonio missions, which are ran by the National Park Service. And if that's important to you, you might want to think about that when you buy your ticket. The other company, I believe it was City Sightseeing Tours, they get you to the big art museum and the old brewery district market. And I believe that's the difference. Otherwise, they all pretty much make the same stops and get you to the same areas. One of them gets you to the San Antonio missions. The other one gets you, I think, to an art museum and a kind of really upscale, nice flea market area. So, depending on what you're into, you just might want to think about that when you get your trolley tickets. And they may have changed since then. They might cover more ground or less ground at this point. I don't know. But I believe that was the case when we did this tour. Several military bases in San Antonio. I didn't know this, but I called my dad while we were in San Antonio, and he'd actually been in there when he was in the military. He'd been to San Antonio, which that makes the place even more special for me. I wanted to mention on this tour, on this trip, actually on both of our trips to San Antonio, we did some ghost tours with the Sisters Grimm Ghost Tour Company. And if you like ghost tours, they did an excellent job. Probably no kidding, I've been on at least 20 or 30 ghost tours when we've gone to towns. And some of them are great, and some of them... I don't even want to mention the town, but we went on one where it was a little old fella giving his little talk, and no one, he wasn't mic'd. I think the crowd was way too big for him, and I think everybody walked off the tour way before it was over, and it was bad. It was a free tour in his defense, but it was pretty bad. Anyway, but the Sisters Grimm, they do a great job. The first time me and my wife were in San Antonio, we did their tour. I forget how much it was, but they have a tour where you get to have dinner at the Minger. Then they do a tour through that hotel, and then after that they take you just on a walk around San Antonio, and that was definitely a great value. A fella named Mark led our tour, and he was great. He's actually been on some of the ghost shows you see on TV. He wrote a book about one of the haunted places he was associated with, and he was a lot of fun. It was a great tour. And they actually, in the tour, I don't want to give it away, but there's a hotel in town where executions happen in the hotel before it was a hotel. Very, very, very dark story, and they tell some great ones. We're by the brewery. This was a little brewery market area. We actually went through there. That was a lot of fun. It was crowded, but it was justifiably crowded. We had a good time there. We didn't stop there this time, but we did a little later on while we were here. And then the second time we were in San Antonio, actually on this trip, they do a bus, like a ghost bus tour. And we did that one with James. And that was incredible. That was a lot of fun. They take you obviously a little further out, give you a little more history. They gave us some gadgets to do some ghost hunting with. I personally just appreciate the stories more than anything. And I mentioned that I'm a big fan of Borglum, who sculpted Mount Rushmore. At one of the cemeteries they took us to, we got to see Lincoln Borglum's grave, and that was an unexpected, huge bonus for me. I was really excited about that. A big fan of Borglum. So yeah, and right now we're going by, I believe that is called the Grotto. It's kind of a cave carving with some scary faces in it. It's a bit of a landmark in San Antonio, and it was pretty cool. Our bus driver Robert actually gets out a little bit and points some stuff out to us. I wanted to say too, this was our third trip to Texas. I think around 2013 we took a trip and we drove through Louisiana, and we came back up and just barely skirted the easternmost tip of Texas, and we went to Texarkana, which is a fascinating town. I was really fascinated with the Moonlight Murders, which occurred in that town 80 or 90 years ago now. Very interesting, unsolved string of murders that occurred. Probably influenced some of the horror movies of the 80s. In fact, there was a horror movie based on it in the 70s, and then a remake of it just a few years ago. But it's a really strange case, and some interesting books written about it. And we anyway, that was just a book I read while we were in that area. But we went to Texarkana. There's actually a post office there. Again, I love postmarks. It's technically in Arkansas and Texas, and their postmark reflects that. So I had to stop there and get my postmark. They were a little confused though. A lot of post offices I stop at appreciate people that collect postmarks. I guess not many people have stopped there for postmarks because I confused them. They were like, "You want what?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just want a postmark." They gave it to me and they were nice about it, but you could tell that they just don't get a lot of people asking for postmarks. And then back in 2015, my wife and I went. Did a little Texas trip. We went to San Antonio, and then we drove through the hill country, and we went to Austin. Austin's a neat little town. I wanted to point out there's some little artsy goldfish here and bats. There's a lot of bats, and even you can see some bat droppings here that the bus driver pointed out to us because it's such a bat covered area. So yeah, we went through hill country and then we went to Austin, and we stayed a couple of nights in Austin at the Driscoll Hotel, which we've stayed at and visited many nice hotels. The Driscoll might be the nicest hotel I've ever set foot in. It's definitely top 3, but it's a spectacular old historic hotel. Lyndon B. Johnson spent a lot of time there. Dated Lady Bird. He was there when some of his major political campaigns were going on. LBJ is heavily attached to that hotel, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful hotel. They had some great oil paintings pretty much everywhere, and we loved that hotel. I had just a perfect moment at that hotel. If you travel a lot, there's moments that are just perfect, like everything is just magic. And one night we had been out, and we were coming into the hotel, had dinner, and we were walking to our room, and we cut through this little dining area, little folky. A couple of guys were playing music, and as we walked into the room, the guy started playing the Grateful Dead's Bertha, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. Kind of a magical song in its own right. And we just stood there and listened to it, and it was just such a great moment, and I'll always remember that. Speaking of music, the Driscoll in Austin, another favorite band of mine, Concrete Blonde, they wrote a song about a ghostly experience at that hotel, so I thought that was pretty cool too. But yeah, that's a nice hotel. Austin we liked, but it's a little riffraffy. I mean, I hate to say that, but we walked several blocks one day, and at least once on every block, we were approached by aggressive panhandlers. And I know, I mean, everybody has their different feelings about that, but and I did social work for 10 years. I understand, and I love helping people, but it's especially when they're aggressive, it can get a little scary. But yeah, so yeah, Austin's weird. It's a good weird town. We went to the Museum of the Weird there too, which I highly recommend. That was pretty cool. Oh, and we went to the LBJ Presidential Library, and then as we went through Hill Country before, we stopped at all the Lyndon B. Johnson presidential sites. So that was a big highlight to me. I love presidential sites, and you can cover a whole lot of Lyndon B. Johnson ground in a short period of time there. So that was a lot of fun. And while we were in Hill Country, one of my all-time favorite movies, I love horror movies, and one of my favorites is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is still, I know when we were in high school, we would rent that movie. A story for another day, renting videotapes for your VCR. But we would rent that movie and play it at parties with the volume down and ad lib. And that was pretty funny, but it's a scary movie. It's a darn scary movie, and it's messed up. But I've always loved it. My wife, several years ago for my birthday, my wife bought me a banister or a little spindle. It's a piece of it was a piece of the front porch from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, and I love that. But they actually dismantled some of that house, sold a few cabinets and that sort of thing, some wood stuff from the house, but they moved the house to another location, and it's now a very nice bar and restaurant. So we actually stopped there and had dinner one night at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house. It's just kind of interesting stuff. But yeah, Texas Hill Country is I'd like to spend some more time out exploring that at some point in the near future. Oh, I wanted to mention we're about to come up on the VFW Post 76, which is the oldest in Texas, built in 1904. And our bus driver pointed that out to us, I think right around here. We also stopped in Luckenbach, which is a little town that you just stop at to stop there. And it's mentioned in songs, and it's just a little town that when you're traveling, you stop there because it's there. And we stopped there, and we really enjoyed the experience. There were a couple of shops. I think there was a little restaurant. A little older folky guy was performing, doing wagon wheels. And I don't care what anybody else says, that is a great song, and I do not get tired of it. Unlike certain Jimmy Buffett songs, which are great songs, but I got tired of a long time ago. But I still love wagon wheels, and that was just kind of neat, hearing the little guy sing that while we were in Luckenbach. Oh, I was going to say, too, while we were in San Antonio, our bus driver said that was the best barbecue place in Texas. I forget the name of it, but I didn't get to go there. But I do love barbecue. I wanted to mention, too, while we were at the LBJ, I believe it was the National Park Ranch, there's quite a driving tour there. And there's a 1920s place that's, it's set up like a home in the 1920s. And it reminded me the smells, that kind of salty meat smell. And a lot of the just tools and things of that nature. Even though this house was set up to be 1920s-ish, it reminded me so much of my grandparents' house that we used to hang out at, in the early, let's just say in the early 80s, when I was really, really young. And I remember my granddad, he had two wagons, like, the old covered wagon kind of thing. They were all broken down and wood and in bad shape, but he had a couple of, actual wagons like that. And even though it was the 80s, they were still kind of farm and pioneer types. They were living pretty primitively even at that time, and I really miss that. And there's something really beautiful about that. And my granddad, not to get sidetracked here, but he would make burgoo, and I remember the cousin. If you're not from Western Kentucky, it's a soup with everything in it, and it's probably my favorite meal ever. But he would make that, and lots of people would come over, and they would bring tomatoes and whatever other vegetables they had, or goats, whatever. And he had this big, witch's cauldron kettle kind of thing, and he'd cook it up in that, and it was so good. Oh, and here's a lock right there in the, if you're trying to cross there, they have to raise the water levels or lower them depending on which way you're going. That's something fascinating. If you don't know much about locks, it's always fun to stop and check one out when you have the opportunity. But yeah, my grandparents, they were, they were from another age even before that age happened. My granddad was a tough old German. He said he could wrestle and just beat anybody. Yeah, it's a story for another day, but it was neat at the LBJ Ranch seeing this old 1920s house. And I really, really appreciated it. Reminded me a lot of my dad's parents. I wanted to mention, too, before I forget about it, mentioning the history of San Antonio. Back in 1936, literally 100 years after the Battle of the Alamo. And that's, if you're into numbers and ghosty stuff and folklore, threes and sixes come up a lot in historic events in San Antonio. If anybody else has recognized that, let me know. I'd love to hear what you think about that. But in 1936, the most legendary blues guy ever in rock and roll history, arguably, Robert Johnson, recorded half of his currently still known and existing recordings at the Sheraton Gunter Hotel. It was the Gunter Hotel then. I think it's now a Sheraton in San Antonio. And that's a pretty big deal. Again, if you're into folklore and stuff, he's the guy that legend says he went down to the crossroads and traded his soul to the devil so he could learn how to play guitar and basically invented rock and roll. And I've heard, and again, if you read up on this stuff, there are some people that feel that that's a very literal story. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's a fascinating story, and I definitely have Robert Johnson on my iPod. And when I was in San Antonio, you make that pilgrimage to the Gunter to check that out. That's some cool stuff. And I went in there, and the people there are very nice. They know people want to go up and look at the room. It was occupied the day I visited, or the couple times I visited, it was occupied. But you can still go up and take a picture of the door, and that kind of thing. And I think that's just fascinating as heck. The guy at the front desk told me, rock stars and famous bands, when they're in town, they stop by to see the Robert Johnson room. And I've heard, was it John Mellencamp? A couple of people have recorded in that room just because of that. It kind of makes me want to go buy a guitar, learn how to play it, and rent that room one night just to do that. Just to have that kind of real experience. I think that would be something to do one of these days. Or if you knew how to play guitar, that would be something cool for you to do. But yeah, Robert Johnson recorded in San Antonio, so that's a big deal in my opinion. Wanted to mention we're about to pass the El Capitano, the Tropicano Hotel, which was the first on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, and lots of celebrities and big names used to hang out there. Yeah, we're going past it right now. The Riverwalk. I know the first time we went to San Antonio, everybody said, don't miss the Riverwalk. Make sure you do the Riverwalk. Walk along the Riverwalk. And that's kind of almost, in San Antonio, that's almost like saying, hey, make sure you check out the sidewalk. If you're in San Antonio, you're going to be by the Riverwalk. You're going to experience it. It's going to happen. Possibility of the first hotel we stayed at in San Antonio, it literally ran through our hotel. But it is really cool. There's a river that kind of goes through town. It's kind of the main heart right through town. Doesn't quite go by the Alamo, but it's really close to it. And you can take boat rides, do that sort of thing through there. It's something really unique to San Antonio. It almost reminds me of when you see the videos of gondolas going around. It's something kind of like that. It's just a very lazy, relaxed vibe, and there's little kind of touristy boats going up and down the Riverwalk all the time, and everybody just walks around. There are lots of restaurants. It's something to see. I made a video when we took a little boat ride on the Riverwalk. I'll probably post that separately, but it's something really nice. And I do have to talk some about the Alamo before I forget. And I can talk about the Alamo for forever. I wanted to mention a couple of books that I liked a lot about the Alamo. They kind of gave me an idea of what was going on with it, because everybody knows the Alamo, but I don't think everybody really gets what the Alamo was about. 1836, you had some guys trying to keep Texas or get Texas independent from Mexico, defending the Alamo. It was less than 200 guys defending against Santa Anna's Mexican army of at least a few thousand Mexicans. And a couple of books that kind of gave me a really good idea of what was going on. A Time to Stand, the epic of the Alamo, The Epic of the Alamo by Walter Lord, and also Wallace Cheriton, Exploring the Alamo Legends. I really liked both of these books. Before we took our trips, I read those to kind of give me an idea of what was going on. And they covered it. And there's a whole lot of really still unexplained things that happened at the Alamo and with the Alamo. And that's just something to think about when you're here. Oh no, I wanted to point out this is the Masonic Temple in town. I think Sam Houston and Santa Anna were both Masons, just for what that's worth. Just an interesting bit of trivia. But yeah, the Alamo is a really fun topic to read up on because there's varying accounts of the way Davy Crockett died. Probably one or two that are kind of commonly accepted as, yeah, that probably happened. But there's some discrepancies there. Also with the Alamo, there just wasn't, good record keeping at that time. And a second or third hand account of what happened at the Alamo is pretty significant just because they're so scarce. And that's, caused some debate later on and that sort of thing. Wanted to point out here the Emily Morgan Hotel. And is that's something fun to read up on too. Neat hotel. And I don't want to bring up Santa Anna's Mistress and the Yellow Rose of Texas, but those kind of factor into this particular hotel. And it's right by the Alamo. Lots of really fast, and look how ornate that is. Lots of fascinating hotels linked to the Alamo right here where the battle took place. If you get a room in one of these hotels, I mean you're sleeping on sacred ground there. I always loved the TV show King of the Hill, which was based in Texas, and Hank Hill was a proud Texan, and I just remember him referencing the Alamo. I think we were right by the Aztec Theater, which is significant. But yeah, Hank Hill, I always loved that show, and I remember him. I think he got trapped in the Alamo one night. I know when we visited San Antonio and I mentioned the Alamo, some of my smart aleck friends brought up a certain bike supposedly hidden in the basement of the Alamo. I still love Pee Wee Herman, but that joke got old. Yeah, but the Alamo, again, you had just a fistful of defenders basically knowing that they were going to get wiped out. No real survivors. And again, Santa Anna, the general of the Mexican army, actually played a song before the battle. And that song it was basically a signal saying, don't bother surrendering. It's not going to do you any good. So yeah, that whole group of defenders was wiped out. A couple people got out, a couple of messengers got out before the battle, and then after the battle they spared, I think there was just a fistful of kids and women that made it out, and their accounts have some value, of course. And speaking of, we're going by the San Fernando Cathedral. While we were there, they had a laser show at night, kind of the history of Texas and the U.S. It was really cool. Very significant Catholic church. What's supposed to be the remains of the Alamo defenders are in there. In a very small box, actually, right when you walk in. And it's debatable if they're there or not, but it's considered to be the site where the defenders are basically resting, or what was left of them. Really, really pretty church. We went in there several times, and it's just nice going in there. Lots more history in that church too, actually, even relating to the Alamo. But it's a neat place. They actually have a gift shop, and I thought that was pretty cool. It wasn't over the top or crazy or anything like that. But yeah, it was definitely something to check out when you're in town. Yeah, something else about the Alamo. Again, when we were there in 2017, everybody was talking about how the shops, I think Ripley's Believe It or Not, lots of the little trinket shops right there around the Alamo have been told that they'll need to vacate over the next 10 years. The plan was to rebuild some of the bigger part of the Alamo, some of the wall around. When people talk about the Alamo, that's basically just a little church that was in the fort. So they were going to rebuild some more of the fort. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was keeping up with some of the websites about some of the plans. Some of the plans were big and crazy, and I'm not sure how much of that's happened. Oh, wanted to point out here too as we pass it. This is the little market. I believe it's Market Square, and it's a great flea market. I actually, I like to paint toy soldiers. I found some cool soldiers here. Lots of fun markets. Lots of neat imported type items. Lots of cheap knickknacks. There was a great, and everybody told us to get some coffee and a pastry at the restaurant there, and we did, and it was so worth it. I had like a cinnamon donut kind of thing. It was a Mexican pastry, and it was so good. I got some coffee. It's just a really, really neat place to stop, and we just really enjoyed that. Yeah, so some of these businesses were told that they were going to have to vacate and leave so they could rebuild this wall. And I read some of the plans. They were actually going to try to build some of the wall out of glass and try to make it to where you could kind of see inside and get a feel of, well, here was the wall, but you could still look inside almost like a fish tank. That was kind of how I visualized it in my head. Some interesting ideas, some expensive ideas. I think some of the locals really objected, though, to some of the proposed buildings. The project was supposed to take, I want to say, around 10 years, and I don't know what the current status is of that now, but that was all the talk when we were there in 2017, and I think some of that just fizzled out. So I'm just not sure what's going on with that or what the idea is now. Also, right now, I believe we're going past part of the University of Texas campus. Yeah, so there's, and we're going along, and there's quite a bit I wanted to mention before I'm done with this video, because like I said, I really like this town, and I like Texas a lot too. And Texas is just such a big place. There's certain states to me that justify so much exploration. Like you've got to spend more than just a 1 week trip in certain states. And Texas, California, Arizona, Florida, there's a fistful of states that just really, really justify a whole lot of exploration. And Texas, man, is really one of those. Wanted to mention, Texas is big on music. Music is just a big deal in Texas. And one of my all-time favorites, and he's somebody that's not really on the national radar the way I feel like he should be, is a guy named Darden Smith. Darden Smith out of Texas. He had a couple of albums that I really loved. One of them in particular was Pumped Up in the 90s. I want to say in the early 90s. I almost felt like they were trying to promote him, as a pretty boy. The way they were promoting a lot of boy bands back in the early 90s. But that wasn't him. He was a darn good songwriter. And if you're a musician's musician, you probably know Darden Smith. But he put out, he's prolific. He's put out a ton of stuff. He's still out there. And I know, he's brilliant in my books. He had a song called Little Victories. And that whole album is just really, really good. It's very mellow. It's the kind of stuff I'll listen to when I'm going to bed. But I love that guy, and he made some great music out of Texas. And I wanted to just make sure I mentioned him when I'm talking about Texas. Darden Smith. I actually got to see him when I lived in Cleveland, and this is the state of music. He actually opened up a show for another Texas musician at a small club, and that was probably around 2004 or so. But it was the kind of show that I'm sure there were maybe 150 people at this show. But to me, Darden Smith should be I don't know. I was so glad to see him, and I met him after the show, and got to tell him how much I enjoyed his music. Of course, he signed. I brought several albums, and he signed them all. And he was just a swell guy. And it was great to get to see him live once. I think he mostly plays around Texas these days. And I know there's a ton of even legendary Texas musicians, but I wanted to mention Darden Smith. And while I'm talking about music, over by the Alamo and the Minger and that whole area, there's a mall, and it's a cool mall. Go there if you like malls. I like malls. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't, but it's a cool mall. And behind the mall, kind of in a little area with some tables to sit and enjoy your meal and that kind of stuff. They always have every time I've been there, they've always had a band, and I believe it's called Andean Fusion, and they play music. Oh, and I was gonna say too, we're looking at, I believe it's the Gunther Flour Mill, which kind of looks like a castle, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, they play music out behind that mall, and I'm not even sure what you would. I want to say it was called Peruvian, and I think it's more of a collective of musicians, because we went back there and watched them several times, and it seemed like there were different guys here and there performing, and they would play like not a flute. There might have been a guy playing a guitar and a guy playing, and I can't believe I can't think of this right now. It's not a flute, but it's kind of, well, it's just something flute-like. And they were really good. It was very mellow. It was all instrumental, and they mostly did like popular songs, like popular classic rock songs, done. I don't want to compare it to Muzak, but it was just them doing these great instrumental versions of mostly classic rock type hits. And I bought several of their CDs. I really enjoyed them. And I even bought a CD of Christmas songs. My mom will listen to Christmas music any time of year, so I bought her their Christmas album. And they were real pleasant. I had them sign my CDs too. But that's something to catch if you're in San Antonio. I know on both of the trips when we were in San Antonio, they were out there. I think they just about go there every day and play music for tips and sell CDs. And it is definitely worth watching. I would pay to see them somewhere else. And I think they just pretty much play there all the time. I assume they're still doing that. But I wanted to mention those guys real quick. So, another place we went to in San Antonio was the Buckhorn. It's a it's a museum of taxidermied animals. And they have a restaurant in there and a cute gift shop. It's over the top. It is really something special, and it's a real throwback kind of attraction. But it's one of those things, when you go to San Antonio, you've got to check out the Buckhorn. And it's crazy. As I'm describing it, it's not, a room of 20 mounted fish and a polar bear. It just goes on and on and on. It's like I said, it's just crazy. Oh, a couple. Man, there's so many things I want to mention. With going back to the Minger, there is, Teddy Roosevelt recruited Rough Riders there. I was going to say I had one of my few, what I might consider a ghostly experience at that hotel. In the men's restroom on the first floor, I went in there and I was washing my hands. I was the only one in there, and I did not hear a door open, and I heard a very mechanical voice say, it just kind of said something like, is anyone in here? And it was very audible. I heard it. Again, it was very, mechanical's the only way to describe it, but I heard that, and it was just a little bizarre. I'm not going to say it was a ghost. It could have been, something coming through the vent, or, any number of things, but there it is. Oh, and that's a former church. I believe our bus driver told us it was a former church that is now a bar. We did not go there, but I always appreciate a repurposed church. Not sure if I would start that kind of business in a former church, but it's there. And we're about to come up on, I think it was called Rosario's Mexican food. Yeah, it was Rosario's Mexican, and people said that that was the best Mexican food in San Antonio. We ate there. We liked it a lot. I will say we ate at several Mexican places that we were unimpressed with. And I'm sure we probably went to the ones right there on the river walk that, they've got your business, so they don't have to be very good. But we did like Rosario's a lot. Also, we're about to go by the Tower of the Americas, which is 750 feet tall, 956 steps up. And we went up. I love Space Needles and that kind of thing. And we went up both times, and I enjoyed it a lot. I wish I had videotaped, or recorded. Yeah, there's Rosario's. I wish I had recorded while we were up in the Tower of the Americas, but I didn't. I took a lot of pictures, and they're on my blog, KentuckyTravels.blogspot.com. But it's just a great way to go up and just see the whole town at one vantage point. They had a really cool gift shop. I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for souvenirs. I collect postcards, buttons, cheap knick-knack souvenirs. I love that kind of stuff. And they had little badges, Tower of Americas, with names on them. So we all got a set of those too, to go with our fake Texas Ranger badges. There's the Tower of Americas in view there. Okay, now it's kind of blocked. We're about to see it again. Yeah, there you go. Oh, and there's a video, like a movie. You watch a movie. At least while we were there, was a kind of an interactive movie where you're watching a movie and you feel like you're flying, and your chairs tilt and they spray mist on you when you're going near a river. I thought it was a really cool experience. They give you 3D glasses to wear during the movie. Back to the Meanger, I wanted to say there is a King and Country Miniatures there. If you collect toy soldiers, I like to paint toy soldiers. It's a company, and I think that's kind of their flagship store, but they sell miniatures. And we like that place a lot. Oh, a Fairmount Hotel right here. It was moved 6 blocks in 4 days in one piece. It was backwards. They took 2 more days to flip it. Just a legendary spot. I think it was in the Guinness World Book of Records for that. And I wanted to mention that real quick. We saw that just a second ago. Yeah, but King and Country, they make collectible, really detailed, nicely painted miniatures. I only want to own miniatures I've painted myself. I wish they sold their miniatures unpainted. I would totally buy them. But their miniatures are so nice. I like what they're doing. They have a spectacular 1/32nd scale diorama of the Battle of the Alamo there, along with some World War II scenes. And you can buy the actual buildings and the painted soldiers that they show. And it's really cool. I had to buy a Teddy Roosevelt Rough Rider. I thought that would just be a great souvenir from this trip. And he was a little pricey, but he is gorgeous. And I just thought that was the perfect, being that he actually spent time there at that hotel. I thought that was a great souvenir to pick up for our trip. And they did have some unpainted plastic soldiers, and I bought some of those to take home. But that's a cool little shop, and you should stop there on your visit to town, because it's just special. So King and Country, trust me, go there. It's nice. Oh, also I wanted the Sisters Grimm here in San Antonio. I mentioned their ghost tours earlier. James, who did our bus tour, wrote a book with his wife Lauren Swartz and James Swartz, Haunted History of Old San Antonio. Definitely one of the better ghost kind of books that you can pick up out there. I had them sign my copy while I was in town, and it tells a lot of the stuff that they tell on the tour. They do a great job. I can't stress that enough. They're cool people, and they've put together. Personally, I'm more into the history and the dark history. I find that more fascinating than some psychic felt an orb or saw an orb over here. They do a good balance. They've got the ghost stories, but they've got those scary, messed up, weird stories too. Again, San Antonio, the Sisters Grimm ghost tours. I can't say enough about them. So I wanted to mention them one more time before this video ends. I know we're running out of time. Oh yeah, and lots of shops over here. We enjoyed all of these little shops. just a nice little place to stop for your souvenirs. Really nice souvenir store that we're about to turn to. And I think they also sell the hop-on, hop-off tickets right over here. It's kind of the main hub of the hop-on, hop-off stuff. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention is through the Alamo, they actually do like a walking tour around the Alamo. It might have been 10 or 15 bucks each to buy the ticket, but you buy a ticket and you go around the Alamo and that area with the guy, and he actually gave us some headphones and he was using a mic, so he didn't have to yell over the crowd, but you could hear him perfectly, plainly, even if you were 15, 20 feet away from him. But he took us around and showed us, like, here's where so-and-so supposedly was shot, here's where this happened, here's where that happened. And that was really cool, and I got to, kind of pick his brain on the tour also, just about, the Crockett legends and that kind of stuff. Speaking of Crockett, there's the Crockett Hotel, another just cool hotel in the area with significance, right there on the spot. I mean, it's basically built on Alamo land. And we're coming up on the back of the Alamo here. It's kind of a walled-in area. And again, this is all, kind of really right down here is just all Alamo. So that's really cool. Anyway, I hope you liked that video, and I appreciate you listening to me babble on about it. Thanks.